Welcome to Illinois Law. This is a service of the Illinois State Bar Association, and I'm your host, John Tice. Well, today we have what I hope will be a very interesting program, a little different from some of the things we've done in the past. And we're going to talk about buying a business and what you should be thinking about if you decide and you're a budding entrepreneur or even investor out there and you want to get involved with buying a business. So we put together a panel of experts who have been involved with this, both the legal aspects of it and the business part of it. And I'd like to introduce our panel of experts at this time. Bill Price is a business lawyer whose firm Growth Law has offices in Warrenville and in Chicago, Illinois. Bill has been active with the Illinois State Bar Association, has chaired several committees and subcommittees, and has actually been involved with drafting of legislation. Bill holds a law degree and a master's in public policy sciences from Duke University. Our second panelist is Marcus May. Marcus is a lawyer with Eckert Kolek, a business law firm located in downtown Chicago, and has clients throughout the suburbs. He helps businesses and business owners solve legal issues and has been a business manager himself. He is a past chair of the Illinois State Bar Association's Business and Securities Law Council and a graduate of University of Colorado School of Law. Our third panelist is Todd Cushing. Todd is a business broker. He's been involved with many mergers and acquisitions and has been a past president of the Midwest Business Brokers and Intermediaries. He's currently affiliated with EBIT Associates Limited. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a subject I think people might be interested in, but don't know where to begin or how to even think about what kind of business they'd be involved in, and am I somebody who would want to do this? So maybe we'll start with you, Bill. Why don't you tell us what kind of, if someone is thinking about starting their own business, what's the first few things they should think about?
I'll think about three different things. You might be trying to buy a job. This is in fact the most common reason for buying a business. Then if you are, well, are you really qualified to do a job in this particular field? If you want to buy a restaurant franchise, do you want to stand on your feet for 16 hours a day and deal with a bunch of people on an hourly wage basis and hire and fire people and do training for flipping hamburgers? If you've been a corporate accountant, this may not be your field. On the other hand, the second question, and it's a very traditional question, is how much money do you have? The amount that you have in your savings will determine how long your capital is going to last, and when the money runs out, your business is over. So the third piece, and this is probably the most important part, is can you sell that product or service effectively, or build a sales team around yourself? If you can make money for your investors, and you will probably be a good prospect to be a business owner.
Anything else that either of you would like to suggest someone should be thinking about if this is something when they're sitting around maybe with their family talking about, all right, here's what I want to do next. What should he or she be thinking about doing? Anything else?
Well, when I grew up at the age of 12, I started working for a family business, and we sold our company in 1998. And after that, I have some money from the sale of our business, so I'm going to go out and buy and sell some companies. Well, the first thing is you better have a good stomach for it, because you don't sleep very well at night. And you better make sure your wife is on the same page as you if you decide to buy a company.
And as far as preparing yourself, you really need to determine, are you entrepreneurial or not? And there's different types of psychological tests you can take out there and see if that's the way you want to go. Once you've determined that you are, and this is something you want to do, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about how you prepare yourself. You need to get your financial house in order. It's a prospect. When you're buying a business, you don't want to be in a situation where you run out of capital, shortly after buying the business. Sure. So begin to gather up the money, begin to get your deal team in place. This is a critical component. One of the things that people do is they go to buy a business and they look at things and then they say, I want this one. And then they go and they get their deal team, meaning their attorney to help them buy, their accountant or due diligence person to help them look at the business, and their banker to finance it. And by the time they get all those people, someone else has snatched up the business.
Well, all right. So, are there resources though out there for? You might have no clue as to how much money you're going to need to get through the first couple of years in this business, or you might have no clue about how to incorporate or how to finance the business. What resources are there, and what should these people be thinking about?
Well, for the small business person, one of the best resources out there in the Chicagoland area is an organization called the Midwest Business Brokers and Intermediaries. It's a trade organization. They put on buyer orientations once a month where you can learn about the basic process in buying a business. They have networking get-togethers, places where you can meet the accountants, the bankers, the attorneys, the business evaluators, people that you need on your side to get the business.
Any other ideas on resources that you are out there if you're just trying to find out what you're going to need to get started?
Well, there's 3 places you may want to go. One, you may want to talk to the bank that will be considering financing that operation. They may have client companies of their own that would be good prospects for purchase. They will be approving or disapproving the loan application, and it's their job, in part, to make loans. In this new environment, a community bank may be a better bet than a great big money center bank. 2, there are small business resources at small business development centers in most of the community colleges in the state of Illinois. Some, like Harper College or College of DuPage, are bigger, and they are associated with the Service Corps of Retired Executives. They will give you free business plan consultation if you need it to run through your numbers and give you a pretty good idea as to whether you have enough to come in along with a loan or possibly other capital to buy a business. And of course, how much you need is determined in part by how big a business you want to buy, how much cash flow there is in that business, and then what opportunities you see that need to be pursued after you've bought the business. Because if you can't add value, again, you shouldn't be there.
Well, you mentioned business that you want to buy. Are we talking about all of these, the suggestions you're making, are these things that apply whether it's an existing business that you want to get involved in or whether it's something you want to start up on your own? Is it the same either way?
I would say it would be the same either way. There's some people that want to buy an existing business where there's someone that's interested in retiring. So it'd be cash flow that's already there. There's some people that feel comfortable in franchises, and most of those are startup. So to me, it seems to be a risk to have a franchise because there is no existing cash flow of history, but there is a proven track record that they can show you. Mm-hmm. So really, I think the individual who wants to get in business, what do you want to do? I think that's where you need to start with are you want to look at a lot of things, or do you want to look at something that you're good at, or something that makes you excited and wants to get you out of bed in the morning?
And so, in your experience, all of you, are there a significant number of these individuals who get involved with this because it's an interest or a love or a passion that they have, and they want to turn that into a job and a way of supporting themselves? Or is it strictly, I'm not happy with my job, I want to go out, I want to be my own boss? As we all know, being your own boss has its own headaches that maybe you haven't thought about all of them, but which is it?
Well, you could have 2 different motives in the same person. Usually when I do something, I've got 5 motives at a time, and I've got to figure out which one is most important or toughest, whichever. But what Todd mentioned may be the most important type. If you've sold out of a business, or if your business unit has been purchased, you will have capital to use. Now, you can either take that, turn it around, turn it into an opportunity to both make an income and then have a harvest in 3, 4, 5 years' time when you've built that business. or you can sit there, try to put it into the stock market, and watch it go away. So take your pick. You want to do better. You need to know what you're doing. So if you are somebody who needs direction from somebody else every minute of every day, then you're probably not entrepreneurial enough to run a company. But if you are somebody who can work a system, well, you might start a franchise, or you might buy a franchise. There's 6,000 franchise systems in the United States. They all have to sell the units where the unit owners are retiring. So there's a market there as well. Find out what fits not just your passions, but what you know you can be competent at doing, and better yet, what you can be competent at building a team around you to do. Because the ideal business is not a one-man band.
And what a bank will support. Because ultimately the bank is going to be lending you money, and they're going to want to put the money behind somebody that they can support. And if you're a computer guy, I was at one of our buyer orientations, the computer guy said, I've done computers for 20 years, it's all I know, and I want out of this industry. The banker that was in the room said, well, we wouldn't back you in anything except what you know.
Right.
Yeah, you know.
So that's the dilemma that
Right.
that individual.
But the thing we're really finding buyers struggle with the most is, how do I find a business? And finding a business is a lot of hard work, and people aren't really prepared for that. And I think Todd, as a business broker, can probably tie us into some of the better ways to buy a business and places to look at.
Well, the ball's in your court. Why don't you give us some ideas on that?
Okay. Being a business owner in a family business, knowing what it's like to cry at the day of the closing, because now our child, working with my dad for 24 years, the company's being sold. I know what it's like to write a check to buy a company. Those were sleepless nights. But how I came into M&A was really is the dissatisfaction of not seeing quality companies for sale. And I would call business brokers, not get returned phone calls. I'd go to these different websites that you can find businesses for sale, and just not being impressed with that. And as Marcus was saying, this organization called mbbi.org was a good place for me to get educated on how the process and how to find a business would be. But when a person calls me and says, I would like to buy a business, can we meet and have a cup of coffee? Time out. We don't need to meet and have a cup of coffee. How much money do you have? Let's start there. How much cash is available in your retirement portfolio that you want to invest in buying a company? And if he says, I have $100,000 to invest in a company, and I ask him, what's your retirement portfolio? He'll say, oh, that's all I got is $100,000. I would suggest maybe not buy a business at this point, because that's quite a bit. So what I would do is suggest to a buyer to spend maybe 20-30% of their retirement portfolio to buy a business. It depends on their age. The older you are, the less risk you want. The younger you are, the more you can put into a business.
And that's a rule of thumb in the industry, or is that?
It's an advisement to a buyer of how much money should I buy a business with. And the second question is well, okay, if you got this much money, what's your return on equity? Buyers usually don't understand that. And if you put your market in the stock market and watch it go down, or the average wealth advisor will tell you 6 to 8% return on your retirement portfolio, for a buyer to buy a business, it's more risk because it's invested in one company. So I say, if they aren't educated on this, let's look at least 35% return on your equity when we plug in the numbers to see if we can afford that business. So once you start that education process with that buyer, how much money they're ready to plop down at the closing table, then we can find what size company they can buy. And then we can look at the different tools for the banking, financing. There's also SBA.
Well, that was one of the, you talked about financing, and I think earlier one of you made some reference to different types of professionals that you would talk to in doing this, and each one, I suppose, has a different role in this. And in the time we have before we take a break here, you mentioned the finance people, either a bank, a traditional bank, or investment by someone. But what about accountants? You talked about an accountant or someone, a due diligence person. What does that mean, and what is that person's role?
Yeah, due diligence is something that we'll actually address a little bit more in the second part of the show. That we'll be showing next month.
Right.
But that's basically checking the business out to make sure the business is what the seller purports it to be. And the financial person, usually an accountant, preferably one with an auditing type background, will look at the finances in the company and see, just tie everything together, make sure it's all as the seller purports it to be, because a lot of the value is driven off the finances.
Sure.
Yeah.
And as we're going to take a break now, but I want to also ask about the role of a lawyer in this process and whether that's something that is usually done. This is Illinois Law, which is a service of the Illinois State Bar Association. I'm your host, John Tice. We'll be back in a moment.
Bye, Tyler.
Bye-bye, Tyler.
Dear, it's time for serious talk
Oh?
about my daycare. When I started out, it was just to help the neighbors. But lately, it's getting to be a real handful. I need some help.
What can I do?
I need advice on more space, a loan,
What about incorporating?
and insurance.
Wait, I know who we can call.
Times like this require sound advice. Your lawyer can help. A message from the Illinois State Bar Association.
It's your fault! Never! Never!
Over and over,
It's our problem! Leave me alone! Shut up! Out!
time and again,
No! Drive me nuts!
Shut up! You're the dumbest
generation
kid.
after generation.
I hate you. I hate you too.
Isn't it time we stop the cycle? Now.
I hate you. I hate you.
Stop adult violence. Teach kids peace. A message from the Illinois State Bar Association.
Welcome back to Illinois Law. This is a service of the Illinois State Bar Association, and I'm your host, John Tice. We've been talking today about something that some of you out there might be interested in, and that is what to do if you think you might want to start or buy or get involved with setting up a business. And we have three experts in the area that I'd like to introduce again just very briefly, going from left to right, Bill Price, Marcus May, and Todd Cushing. And maybe you could tell us, as we, right before the break, we were talking about a role of a lawyer in that process. Is it advisable, and what role does the lawyer play in the process of buying or getting involved with setting up a business?
The lawyer has to make sure this sale can actually happen. And in every business process, unfortunately, you have to look at what could go wrong, because a lot of these business deals could fall apart. So you don't want to have anybody making misrepresentations. You don't want to have anyone making applications and paying large amounts of money to fund finders that then don't do much of anything for you. You need
What
to
do you mean
have
by a fund finder?
that could be somebody like a loan broker, or it might be a securities broker. Larger businesses, you might have to do a private offering of securities so that you find more investors than your own money.
Right.
And there's usually 3 or 4 or 5 different kinds of money once you get up to a $10 or $20 million business.
Right.
that
And
go
we're going to
into
be
the capital
talking, this
structure.
is the first of two-part show on buying a business, and we are going to talk about the financial piece of it a little more later, but that is certainly something that you have to be thinking about. I think we mentioned before, from the start, you have to think about what your sources are, how much you're going to need, and what the sources are going to be.
Yeah, and to further answer your question as far as attorney's role at the beginning of the process, a lot of times it tends to be a little bit limited in that a lot of clients don't want to spend fees up front. However, there are some things that are critical there. One is when the clients found a business that they want to buy, they need to act quickly and get it off the market. That will require a letter of intent to be drafted and accepted by the seller.
Because this process could take a while,
The,
right?
the process can take a while, but when you find a good business, you're probably not the only one that found that good business. There may be other buyers out there, and you want that seller to begin to engage with you. So you really should have your deal team in place, which includes a good deal attorney. Don't use your divorce attorney or your general business attorney. Use someone who's not adversarial for adversarial purposes. So a commercial litigation attorney is not a good idea. You want someone who's a deal maker, not a deal breaker. And in getting that person on your side to begin with, if you're working with Todd as a broker and Todd brings you a deal and you say, wow, I really like this, then the next step is let's get a letter of intent to the seller, get this business as an exclusive item that I can look at and begin to look at that business a little more closely, get it off the market so other people can't buy it. That requires, generally speaking, an attorney to draft a good letter of intent. Other places you may want to use an attorney are in working with your broker agreement. If you do an agreement with Todd or another type of business broker, you may want that reviewed by a business attorney. Likewise, dealing with confidentiality agreements. In order to look at any business, the seller is going to ask you to sign a confidentiality agreement. Some of those need to be looked at carefully.
Because you'll be looking at the financials from the business and
Correct.
so.
Yeah.
And from the M&A side, merger and acquisition side, I love working with M&A attorneys that know what they're doing. A buyer will call me and say, well, I'm going to use my best friend from college who does real estate. And that is his first mistake, to do a deal. They know the deal. The M&A guys, they know how to do the process quickly. They know that return phone calls need to be made now. Negotiations, the time we need to move things along. So it's important.
How we were talking a little bit earlier about this, but how do you find what a business and what should be thinking about it? Maybe you don't have. Maybe some people, as we said, might have a specific business. They already know what they're going to do. This has been their hobby, or they've been working in it. But what if you want to be your own boss, or you want to invest in a business, but you're not exactly sure what that business is going to be? How do you find a business? What's out there?
What I would do first is find out, do they have manufacturing background? That would be a good fit. Business service or distribution. Those are your three major categories. Then you have your franchises, as we were talking. But
and I know I assume most people have a sense of what we're talking about when we say a franchise. But just very briefly, what is a franchise as distinguished from these other things? These are
it could be a Culver's restaurant, Taco Bell.
So these are established nationwide, often chains or something where you buy. You're the owner. You're the franchisee of the business.
That is correct.
You're basically a site operator for somebody else who's got a business plan.
Right.
And if it's a good franchise, they've got a good advertising program. Franchises vary in quality a lot. And one of the nice things that you have is they have a disclosure document, so you get the names of all of their system franchise operators. So you have resources at the end of the phone who can talk about the system and talk about what that business has been like for them. However, the failure rate is about the same for franchises as it is for non-franchise businesses.
Interesting.
So you
So
want to
even
be
though
careful.
it's a known quantity, but not necessarily the right location or the right business plan, or they're not sufficiently capitalized. I mean, things that can go wrong with that.
And franchises are in every industry, from hotels through auto repair. So it's not a line of business thing. It's how that particular system raises its capital. It raises capital in part from operator investments.
And the one thing I would say to people who are contemplating, should I be entertaining the thought of a franchise or not, if you're an entrepreneur that wants to be your own boss and run the show, for the first couple of years, franchising is okay. But after that, you're being told you need to put these signs up, you need to do this, you need to do this. You've all seen the McDonald's promotions or whatever. And you have to advertise that burger at that time for that price. And if you don't like that
Can be a
idea,
little frustrating if your goal to go into this was to be your own boss. You find you have
You find you have another boss. Yeah, and after about 5 years, you begin to think you know it all, and you don't want to pay that franchise fee of 7 or 8% to the franchisor. Yeah. On the other hand, we've all had clients where they'll buy multiple franchises, and they love managing that business and make a good living doing so. So you just need to look at that to see, is it for me or not? It's really different being a franchise owner than a standalone business owner.
And I would jump in and also say when it comes to financing, sometimes when you already have the cookie cutter franchise, when you go to SBA, they will support you and to buy that franchise much easier than it would to buy an independent business, because there's much more unknown to that banker who doesn't know that specific business that you might be buying.
Yeah. And that brings us back to your subject, which is what kind of money do you need to bring to a deal? Remember, it's not just your money that is relevant. If you're buying a business, you are buying a cash flow. The more predictable, the more high growth, the more attractive that cash flow is, the better the special sauce in that business, the better a bet that business will be to make significant money for you and your partners. Okay. So you look at this, and then you start blending the different sources of money. Your finances, maybe partners that you'll bring in. Bank money, which might be working capital, or it might be purchase money for equipment, or it might be purchase money for real estate. You might bring in the larger business deals, funds, like we will talk about in our second meeting. So think about all of the pieces of the capital structure and which are the organizations that can help you. That's where your lawyer should help.
Well, thank you very much. This has been helpful for people out there interested in getting into buying a business. Thanks to Bill Price, to Marcus May, and to Todd Cushing for joining us and on this Illinois Law, a service of the Illinois State Bar Association. Thank you very much. I'm your host, John Tice. Welcome to Illinois Law. This is a service of the Illinois State Bar Association. I'm your host, John Tice. And this is the second in a two-part series on buying a business, what is involved with it, and what things that individuals might be thinking about, should be thinking about, if they decide to get involved with either starting up their own business, buying an existing business. And we put together a panel of experts to talk about what kind of things that you should be thinking about if this is something that appeals to you. And I'd like to introduce them at this time. Bill Price is a business lawyer whose firm Growth Law has offices in Warrenville and in Chicago, Illinois. Bill has been active with the Illinois State Bar Association. He's a past chair of the Business and Securities Law section, has also been active with the bar in drafting legislation in this area. Bill holds a law degree and a master's in public policy sciences from Duke University, and has written treatises and articles on limited liability entities around the world. Marcus May, our second panelist, is an attorney with Eckert Kolak, a business law firm located in downtown Chicago, and has downtown Chicago has clients throughout the Chicago area. Marcus is also a past chair of the Business and Securities Law Council of the Illinois State Bar Association, and is a graduate of the University of Colorado Law School. And our third panelist is Jeff Gallo, who has been involved with private equity for the last 22 years, has experience in private equity investment. He's the managing director at this time of Geneva Glen Capital, which was established in 2008. He's been involved with over 130 acquisitions as a master's, an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg Business School. Thank you all very much for joining us. And we talked before in the first part of this two-part discussion about what people should be thinking about if they're buying a business. And one of the subjects that came up frequently as we talked was, Well, the first thing you should be thinking about is, can I afford it? What kind of money do I have? What kind of resources? And where I can go to find additional capital or resources to get involved. Why don't we start with that? What kind of financing would be involved in starting a business, and what should be the individual be thinking about in setting up or buying a business? Anyone?
Let me try to address this a little bit. A couple of suggestions. One, of course, is that the business that you buy will determine what kind of capital is necessary. If you're buying a retail store, you're going to need to have inventory money for Christmas. And that's a working capital loan, the easiest kind of SBA loan, because of course what you buy collateralizes the loan itself.
And by the way, just I don't want to interrupt you, but SBA loan, that's a
Small Business Administration operates with 21 different banks around the state of Illinois.
okay.
They are direct lenders. They use a government guarantee to the extent of either 75 or 80%, or if you're doing an export deal, sometimes 90% of the amount the bank loans.
Okay.
And that's helps support you in getting a loan.
Okay. And so, did you finish that part of it, though? What kind of things that the individual should be thinking about as to how much?
Right. So
Capital
you
in.
might need working capital. You might need capital to buy real estate or to buy equipment. There are entire funds devoted to sale-leaseback transactions for equipment on LaSalle Street, and you might be going there, for, particularly where you've got $1 million, $2 million pieces of equipment. That's valuable by itself. Real estate has its own set of lenders, community banks, real estate investment trusts, other types of people at all sizes of finance deals. So what you want to do is make your deal look like what that finance source does all the time.
All right. Well, Jeff Gagno, why don't you tell us, since you've been involved from the other side of this, I come to you and I'm thinking about buying an existing business or setting up a business, and you're going to be giving me advice and maybe even being involved with investing in this business or finding financing for me. What do you want to hear from me?
Sure. As a private equity investor, I can help you buy a business, especially if it's a business you know the industry well. You came from that industry, you ran a bigger company. We'd love to back you, particularly if you're prepared to invest personally in the deal with us. That's great. So we can help you magnify the size of the company you may want to buy. You may have $1 million to invest to buy a company. We could invest alongside with you multiples beyond that. Now the trade-off will be we'll probably still have control, so if things don't go work out, we may need to replace the person running the company. On the other hand, you can build a much bigger company. We can support acquisitions. I had a conversation like this once with an individual. We backed him to buy an $8 million business. Then we proceeded to make over 100 acquisitions in his industry. He had come from the industry before, was very successful, but now he wanted to do it for himself. And we ended up making 100 acquisitions. The company went public, was sold 13 years later for $1.5 billion. So dreams can come true in a big way.
Any other ideas, though, about not just sources of financing, but how does someone learn the information about how much I'm going to be needing? If I want to start a business, I don't know whether I need, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million to get me through a couple of years and to get things started so I can get the cash flow rolling in, if it isn't already an existing business. How do you know?
One of the places to begin is with the business plan. And that only really comes into play once you've identified the business. To begin with, you have to figure you're going to have to put some money in. As Jeff mentioned, he invests with people who invest with him. Banks will also require buyers to, quote, have skin in the game. And so you as a buyer will be expected to bring, say, 10, 20% at least into a deal. And so if you have $100,000 to bring into a deal, and that's 10 or 20%, you can now figure out roughly the size business price you can afford. If you can bring in $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, you can do the math similarly. And that's a place to begin. Then, when you get to your conventional financing, a banker,
This is when now you know what you're going to need.
you say, okay, I've got $10 million to buy a business with,
Okay.
including my money and the bank's financing. Maybe you have some friends that are coming in, or some family. Don't overlook those sources of financing, friends
And that's very
friends and
common,
family.
isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I do have to say, always prepare for the exit in mind, and so have an agreement in place right up front that talks about what's going to happen when one person wants to sell the business and the other one doesn't. What happens? What if there's a death? Now you're in business with the person's heirs. Is that really what you wanted, or is there supposed to be some sort of a buy-sell there? That's something that's commonly overlooked between buyers.
And lawyers often get involved with drafting these documents because they've done it before. And
Absolutely, yeah.
Either use us now, or else you use us later. Hagshanus versus Gaylord is the classic instance of the worst possible scenario.
which
A
is
stymie. All four partners hated each other. Their ex-girlfriends or ex-wives were now attempting to come in and run the business, and Hagshanus wanted out. Well, the court wouldn't let him out. And furthermore, he finally lost the case. Why? Because the court said even as a minority shareholder, he had fiduciary duties to the business, and therefore if he started up a competing business across the street, he would be harming his old business. In fact, he ended up paying $600,000, and it was worth it because he now owns a $20 million travel business. But he paid a lot
it was
of
a little
lawyers.
stressful at the time. I'm sure.
Right.
So the point is, prepare up front.
Right.
And to your question on how do I figure out how much, once you've got the dollar amount, you can begin shopping for a business. In our prior show, we talked about how to go about finding a business. Once you found it, then you go to your banker and you go through the cash flows and you see what it's taken to run the business in the past. You look at the financials and you project forward your cash flow needs.
How do you get accurate information about, particularly in an existing business? It's obviously it's a little harder if you're starting from ground up. But on the seller obviously might be selling for one reason or another. Maybe how can you rely on the information you get? Are you allowed to go through those books and determine what the business, how much they're making and what the cash flow is?
Well, John, I think the first, you alluded to it, the first thing you want to think about is why is this person selling? Things are going great, they're young, they're healthy. Why would they want to sell? If they're older and tired or really exited the business and not active in it, that's a different story. So what's the rationale for them selling? Two is, you typically would come up with a request for information. It's a detailed list of, here's everything I want to know about the business, all their financial history, all the information on customers, products, intellectual property, patents. It's sort of, and that will be either emailed to you by the seller's advisor, or maybe posted into a virtual data room, which is more common these days. It's a portal you go on to, and all the information is readily available. So it makes life a lot easier than in the past. So it's buyer beware. I mean, when you buy a house, it's a home inspection, it takes an hour. This is typically a 60-day process of completing your business due diligence, getting all your financing, getting your all the purchase agreements, everything worked out. It's a fairly long process, but if you're a seller, you care about three things. It's about price, number one, but also speed and certainty of close. So there's a fair amount of pressure, and you have to be prepared to dedicate really full time to that effort to buy that business.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned due diligence. What that's a term that's used in
Sure.
this area. What is meant by that?
Yeah, when I do seminars on this, I explain it to buyers. Due diligence is really just making sure you get what you think you're getting. That's really what it is. But then you have to take a look at the different types of due diligence out there. You have the financial diligence. You're going through all of the books and records, tying receipts into you know what's been reported as revenues and things of that nature. You're looking at bank accounts. You're looking at payments out, things of that nature. What's this $100,000 check over here? And all of a sudden you find out there was a payment under the table to somebody to get a big contract. Well, that might require a purchase price adjustment. So that's the financial due diligence. You also have operational due diligence. Jeff mentioned you're getting lots of information. It's not just the financial records. You're going to get contracts out there. You're going to talk to the employees. You're going to talk to customers if you can get access to them. And during the process, it takes a bit of time before you get that trust with
We're
the
going to
seller.
take a break, and I
sure.
know that you'd like to jump in on here on some your ideas on due diligence as well, and we're going to get to that after the break. But this is Illinois Law. This is a service of the Illinois State Bar Association, and I'm your host, John Tice.
Bye, Tyler.
Bye-bye, Tyler.
Dear, it's time for serious talk
Oh?
about my daycare. When I started out, it was just to help the neighbors. But lately, it's getting to be a real handful. I need some help.
What can I do?
I need advice on more space, a loan,
What about incorporating?
and insurance.
Wait, I know who we can call.
Times like this require sound advice. Your lawyer can help. A message from the Illinois State Bar Association.
It's your fault! Never! Mister!
Over and over,
Come on! It's our problem! Leave me alone! Shut up! Out!
time and again,
No! Drive me nuts!
Shut up. You're the dumbest.
generation after generation.
I hate you. I hate you too.
Isn't it time we stop the cycle? Now,
I hate you. I hate you.
stop adult violence. Teach kids peace. A message from the Illinois State Bar Association.
Welcome back to Illinois Law, a service of the Illinois State Bar Association, and we've been talking today about buying a business and getting involved with that dream that you have out there, maybe buying a business, maybe starting up a business. And we put together a panel here of experts who've been involved with this process, Bill Price and Marcus May and Jeff Gallo. If we could, well, before the break, I know that, Bill, you wanted to weigh in on the idea of due diligence. In other words, after you've maybe identified or focused on something that you want to be involved in, what is the next step and what you're doing along there? And we use the expression due diligence. What do you understand, and what would you like to add to what Marcus said there?
Well, there are legal things you need to know in due diligence as well as number things. So, for instance, a doctor in Elmhurst, who I represented after he had done his terrible deal, didn't bother doing a chart audit on what he thought was a great $850,000 business. He found it was a good $450,000 business because the former doctor had violated what are called the Stark regulations on self-referral, and so every one of his old customers, patients, was getting a liver test, which he owned. Every one of them was getting another test. In other words, half of the business revenue was really illegal. He couldn't do much of anything.
Unnecessary tests that he was
The old
ordering.
doctor was dying of some ailments of his own, and there wasn't much he could do to claw back. That's the kind of thing where you want to do your due diligence up front, and you want to have what are called representations and warranties in the transactional agreement, so that if you find these things out, and unfortunately not all of the toads come out from under the rock until you've closed, you can come back and maybe get some of your purchase price back in
Well, you
order to
mentioned
fix the
the
problems.
representation of the warranties, though. But when you buy a business like this, so it's not just buyer beware. That if they if there's misrepresentation involved, you might have some way of getting back and opening up the deal again.
Sure, and another wonderful war story. A client that I warned off wanted to buy what is the classic cash business, a car wash. Well, he was dealing with 3 Jordanians. They explained to him that we have 3 sets of books. We have the one we do for our family, we have the one we do for the Internal Revenue Service, and we have the real books, which we really gave you. Well, I told him not to believe any of the sets of books. I don't know if he went and bought it, but there is actually a way to figure that out. The Internal Revenue Service has an audit manual, and they suggest you check how much water is used and how much shampoo to approximately estimate the volume of washes that are going through. It would be better, however, to have an auditable set of financials and a seller that you knew was not lying to somebody.
Anything else you want to add that you should be thinking about it during this
Well,
process?
during the legal due diligence process that Bill's talking about, some of the other things that happen are that you're looking to make sure that the assets are actually owned by the company, that the stock's actually owned by the company, that all the contracts are assignable, that you can enter into the lease. Some of the worst things that can happen are you're going through a deal, you've got the deal set, everything's great, and then you go to the major customer with whom there's an agreement, and you find that the agreement's not assignable. And now you have to go to that customer to make sure they're going to keep giving you the business.
Any other problems that come up during that process between the time of the initial interest in the business and the and getting the financing and putting it all together and making it happen, helping it close? Anything else that is a concern that you might want to?
There may be insiders who do not want to do a deal because they have had a position, and the reorganization necessary to be efficient may or may not keep that accountant doing things on green paper instead of on computers, may not keep the inefficient operations that are already in place. When you put money into a company, you usually have to make some changes, and change is uncomfortable. These could be family members, they could be inside advisors, they could be employees. You have to make a judgment about the people involved, because it's that team who you are bringing in, as well as the numbers from prior sales. And both have to work to have a successful deal.
And Bill brings up a really important point, the whole cultural due diligence, because the company has been run by the current ownership group and they're leaving. You're going to be the new owner. How will you be able to work with the employees, the customers, the vendors? Those are critical things to look at, and as important as the numbers are and the legal and all the operational things, sometimes those cultural issues can really ruin something a few years down the road.
And that's where if you use seller financing, for instance, that keeps that owner interested in helping you in the transition.
What seller financing?
Seller financing is you borrow money from a bank, and then you also, the seller provides a note back to you as part of the purchase price. So they get paid out over time. It's not as though when the deal closes they scatter and they're not to be seen, because they still have an interest in getting repaid.
And is that commonly done, or is it?
It's fairly commonly done, particularly in smaller businesses. Ones that are going to be acquired by an individual that likely that's the only way a seller will complete a transaction. So he'll get paid back in anywhere from 2 to 5 years with interest, at a reasonable rate. And it does keep them engaged.
And the scenario you described, the seller obviously knows, he or she knows that what the cash flow is, and so they feel pretty confident, unless the person they're selling to doesn't have, I suppose, the same level of interest or expertise.
Well, they're going to do their due diligence on the buyer as well.
Right,
it's
because
reciprocal.
they're not cashing out at that point.
Not completely.
Yeah.
Not completely.
Yeah. Okay. And
Just another comment on seller financing, because this is how deals get to close. You can offer a bit more money, but say, hey, seller, if you believe what you're telling me about how much money there is in this business, we'll give you 1, 2, 3x your EBITDA, earnings before interest, depreciation, and taxes and amortization, but we'll give you that up front. All of this extra that you say is there, well, that'll be in your seller financing, and if it happens, then you get paid. If it doesn't happen, well, we haven't spent that much money, but you at least got the purchase price you said you want if you're going to succeed the same way you said we could.
Yeah, now in our other, the other half of the program, we did talk, and I think we should also repeat this, that there are resources out there so that someone who maybe doesn't have experience, has never run a business before, never been involved in this, doesn't know how much money they're going to need and what other things they should be thinking about doing. There are resources out there that are available to people to help them do this. And are these free, reasonable government programs that can provide information to people?
Sure. There's a wealth of information out there. If you go onto the internet and type in how to buy a business, you'll find all sorts of information from different business brokers telling you the different process, things of that nature. There's industry groups such as the Midwest Business Brokers and Intermediaries group here in Chicagoland area. They have a Wisconsin chapter, Indiana chapter, and that's a free,
they have a website, right?
Yeah, mbbi.org.
Okay.
At mbbi.org, and there's a wealth of resources there for generally the small to medium-sized business buyers, companies under $50 million purchase price generally. And you can find information on how to develop a deal team, the process that you go through, asset versus stock deals, you name it.
Okay. Well, we only have a couple minutes left. Can any of you think about any other pitfalls or dangers, red flags that people should be looking for if they decide they want to buy a business, I suppose, or if they want to sell a business, but particularly if they want to buy a business, that maybe the average person who's never been involved with this before hasn't thought about?
A couple things. One is, I think you should ask yourself honestly and say, will I be able to run this business better than the prior owner did? So if that owner was fantastic, they had great relationships with customers, how will you be able to take the company to the next level, or at least maintain where it was before? And to do that, we talked all about due diligence, which was looking in the past. What could be the warts on the business? But you also have to think about the offense. That is, what's my plan to do with this business? How will I grow it? How will I add more customers, new products, perhaps reduce expenses if the prior owner wasn't focused on expenses? So what's my value creation plan of how I improve this business? So don't forget about the offensive side as well.
Don't fall in love with a deal you're not willing to walk away from. There may be times when the best deal you made is the one you walked away from. I had a client, they went in, we had a trial period. 1 month before the closing was to happen, the biggest customer walked away. The best deal he did was not doing the deal. Sometimes you just need to be ready to do that.
And finally, think about your friendly other investor, the state. They expect back taxes before you could actually receive any money from a business closing.
Back taxes meaning the taxes that were owed by the business
Right.
already.
Any of those things. That's called a bulk sales clearance, and it's a routine part of a business closing. There may be regulatory notices of potential violation outstanding that need to be looked at and resolved before you get to closing, because those costs can be big. And there may be liabilities, and that's the difference between a stock and an asset transaction. If you buy the stock, you buy all the old liabilities. If you just buy the assets, you may be able to say, hey, the liabilities stay in the old company, we have the assets.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bill Price, Marcus May, Jeff Gagno. I hope you've provided some information, some help to some people who might be interested in buying a business. I'm John Tice, your host. This is Illinois Law, service of the Illinois State Bar Association. Thank you very much for joining us.